One of the top things people are getting wrong about longevity is this idea that animal protein is going to make you old.
Dave Asprey is best known as the father of Bulletproof coffee and the founder of the entire biohacking movement. As a 4-time New York Times bestselling author, CEO of Upgrade Labs, and host of a Webby award-winning Top 100 podcast, that's The Human Upgrade, Dave is a maverick in the entrepreneurial health science and biotechnology space.
Because it turns out everything that makes old people young again makes young people more powerful and functional and aware and conscious.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Wow, Chris, that was an amazing intro. You're very welcome. And of course, I'm going to make time for anything having to do with longevity. This is at the core of what I do. In my mid-20s, I had all the diseases that old people get. I had really bad brain fog. It turns out I had chronic fatigue syndrome from toxic mold exposure. I had arthritis since I was 14, high risk of stroke and heart attack as measured by my blood clotting before I was 30. My fasting blood sugar was 117, so I was pre-diabetic. I'd hit as much as 300 pounds and all sorts of autoimmune stuff, Hashimoto's and things like that. Testosterone lower than my mother in my mid-20s. So I started hanging out with this group of my elders in their 80s at one of the first longevity nonprofit groups out there. It was at the time called Smart Life Forum, started in 1993 by one of the guys who invented Ethernet. Soon, okay, so I'm the only guy under 50, much less under 30 at this group. Pretty soon, they're like, hey, Dave, you want to be president? Like, this is awesome. Okay. So I ended up becoming president and chairman of one of the earliest Silicon Valley longevity nonprofits. And I was so frustrated because I was the only person under 50 in the room. And we're 3 minutes from Google's headquarters. We meet right next door to Stanford University. And I got a chance to interview everyone in the longevity space, starting in the late 90s, all through the 2000s. And they would come in every month and give a talk to 100 people. And I said, how could I get someone young to come? And you know what the reality is? You know who cares about reversing aging? Old people. And you know who cares about health? Not young people. Only sick people care about health. So I thought, how do I transform this movement? And biohacking is a restatement of epigenetics and longevity in a way that's palatable, that I would have listened to when I was 19. Because if someone had told me all this stuff, I wouldn't have hit 100 pounds. I wouldn't have spent $2 million reversing my age and fixing toxic mold and chronic fatigue and Lyme disease and high lead and high mercury and low testosterone and low thyroid and all the other crap that I've done. And there's no reason I should have spent $2 million. I'm just grateful that there were people in their 80s who had more energy than I did in my 20s who taught me how to do it. And so I've been carrying this longevity torch. Biohacking is a necessary movement. It's a $10 billion global industry. It's a global movement. And yes, I did start it. I wrote the definition. It's a new word in the English language as of 2018 in Merriam-Webster's, and my name is there in the online dictionary. And it was a very conscious decision to put longevity into the mindset of all of us, because it's really easy to stay young when you're young, and it's really hard to reverse age as you age. So what if we just built this into society? That's what biohacking is about. You get to choose your state. It turns out a lot of people want to be young and strong and powerful and full of energy and full of, sexual vitality and all that stuff, no matter their age. And since half of people now have low testosterone, maybe even more, even in their 20s, everybody wants this. Like we want our power back. And I'm grateful I can be here. I'm grateful I've been able to start, the company that made collagen a $1 billion industry, made MCT oil a $1 billion industry. MCT oil, by the way, at least the right forms of it, it reverses Alzheimer's disease in phase 2 clinical trials. I would never say that, except I'm not selling MCT oil anymore, so I can say it. But did Bulletproof meaningfully reduce the incidence of Alzheimer's disease in the US? I believe it did. But I never had to say Alzheimer's because that would be wrong, because only drugs can cure diseases in the US. and the rest of the world they can't.
Yeah, that's the dance of language about supplements and disease you've got to be careful of. I've got some good news for you, but your testosterone was lower than your mother. Okay, so wow, like that hurts a little. So I've interviewed. When I'm done, I will have interviewed 55 experts in longevity. And something that's coming out of this is that it is a younger and younger crowd is getting more and more involved in this. So you got to be pretty.
I did that.
Yeah, you got to be excited about that. Yeah, because I think if you call it, old age and the diseases of curing the diseases of old age, yeah, you're not going to attract the younger crowd. But you call it biohacking, that's pretty awesome.
One thing you wouldn't know at the start of the biohacking movement, I was working in Silicon Valley. I'm a computer hacker by training. I was vice president of cloud security at Trend Micro, one of the big computer security companies. So I treat the human body as if it's a system I don't understand, but I still have to control it the same way we would do if we're breaking into your computer system. By the way, I have your credit card numbers now. Thank you.
Please be gentle.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sad. There's no room left on those cards. That was not a good hack.
You didn't have to be totally truthful.
This whole idea, though, of hacking and understanding what's going on in your body, it very much parallels what I did do in the computer hacking world. And I want people to understand you have to know everything, but you do have to be in charge of what your body's doing. So with respect to the testosterone thing you brought up with my mom, because of just my curiosity and my desperation to feel good again, I'd come home from work. I couldn't remember anything. My doctor told me vitamin C would kill me and didn't know who Linus Pauling was. And I asked him, I said, what about Linus Pauling, who took 90 grams of vitamin C per day and
tortured his grad students with vitamin C?
And did, right?
In a positive way.
Funny enough, the doctor didn't know who he was. And I said, well, he won 2 Nobel Prizes, the only guy ever to do it. He took 90 grams of vitamin C a day. If you're telling me to stop it, you don't know who he is, you're incompetent. And I fired the doctor. I had a $179 failure to pay on my credit report for 7 years for that. And I didn't mind because I'm like, I'm not paying you for bad advice. So I got really angry. And by the way, this is not how you treat doctors. But I was young and I was an asshole. And the doctors really weren't helping me. They're like, well, here's some antibiotics. I'm like, I've been on them for 15 years every month because I keep getting sinus infections. Tell me why. And they said, they just didn't know. Maybe you should try to lose weight. I'm like, you think? Right? Like I worked out 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week, half weights, half cardio on a semi-vegetarian, low fat, low calorie diet. And I still have a 46-inch waist. Am I eating too much lettuce? And the doctors will look at me and like, oh, you're lying. Like, clearly you're sneaking a Snickers bar. And they just don't believe you. Well, you have to lose weight if you got calories. That's not true. And I have multiple doctors on camera talking about that because one of the things I was dealing with was toxic mold. Toxic mold is an estrogen mimic. At least it can be. It's one of its forms of toxins. There's a type of toxin called zearalenone. This is in household toxic mold, the kind that I had in my house. It's 1,000 times more estrogenic than human estrogens. It's worse than BPA and phthalates and all the things like this. So if I'm swimming in that kind of estrogen, no wonder I couldn't lose weight. And here's how powerful that is. In the farming industry, big animal ranches will give cows zearalenone. It's a pharmaceutical livestock drug called Zeranol. It's an extract of toxic mold. They put a little bit of this waxy substance in the cow's ear and it dissolves into their system. The cow gets fat on 30% less calories. Now, if such a drug can exist, the calories lose weight, it's stupid. It's provably wrong. So as we sit here today, I'm 7% body fat. I exercise 20 minutes a week. I have a caffeine tattoo on my arm so I can like show off my gun. See, that's my excuse. But I exercise 20 minutes a week at Upgrade Labs with AI assisted stuff. I've never been in better shape. I've never had a more functioning body than this. And I'm offended that I spend 702 hours in the gym not getting results. And I'm offended that I was a vegan and then a raw vegan. And I'm offended, not because being offended gives me a right to tell anyone anything, but that's what's motivating some of this. It's like, you know what? If someone would have just told me this stuff in a language that I could have comprehended and cared about, I would have taken action. I would have taken right action. What I did is I took action. I took wrong action that made me sicker, made me weaker, made me fatter, and used all my time and energy. So instead of learning, growing my career, being better at relationships, I went to the gym and I beat myself up and I overtrained and I blew out my cortisol and I didn't get the results I wanted. And I just don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. And that's why I started Bulletproof. I wasn't going to start this as a company. It was a blog. It was going to be at the nonprofit that I was running, but they couldn't decide on the domain name. So I'm like, guys, I'll just take care of this. I'll do it. And I didn't build a list. And I'm like, how do I start a company making this coffee? Because I realized I could make clean coffee that didn't make me crash. And I'd already gone around. I'd studied meditation in the Andes, in the Himalayas, remote parts of Tibet. I had this idea for Bulletproof coffee on the side of Mount Kailash because I noticed the yak butter tea made me feel better. So I'm on this path and I'm just sharing knowledge. And then hedge funds started hiring me and they'd fly me all over the world to talk to them about longevity and increasing cognitive function. So I have billionaires who are, flying me out to talk to them about like, can I really be smarter? Can I really be younger? What would I have to do? And so that was my seed capital to start what became Bulletproof. I eventually raised $90 million of venture capital money that created the biohacking movement and created a company that's done $100 million a year for like 5 years straight.
And created a stupendous biohacking conference.
Yeah, it's the conference, man. By the way, the conference this year is in end of May and beginning of June in Dallas, Texas. Go to biohackingconference.com. And about 3,000 people. And it's kind of like, I used to go to A4M. In fact, I met my former wife, the mother of my children, at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And I like that group. And it's got like its own vibe. The Biohacking Conference is about play. So you come there and you're meeting other people who care about the state they're in. And that includes the conscious state, happiness and psychology and, plant medicines or neurofeedback or breath work, all the way down to the hormones that control dopamine. And so there's all these people who are aligned and just like their eyes are glowing. And then you get all the cool toys. So you get to talk to the inventors, hear the best talks, be inspired, be in community, and play with the big biohacking toys. And because along this path, I bought more than $1 million worth of tech for human performance. And I had it in my barn on Vancouver Island. And I was like, I need to do something with this. So I rented the space underneath Arnold Schwarzenegger's office in Santa Monica about 9 years ago. And I opened Upgrade Labs. And I took all the gear that makes you younger, the gear of biohacking, and I put it there. And I started playing around with business models. And a few companies like, oh, I'll copy Dave. I'm like, you guys are in so much trouble. So they scaled before they figured out how to make money. I didn't. I waited until I had the business model perfect. I know exactly what data. I have this huge data set. So now we have 27 locations opening across the US. It's a franchise. Go to ownandupgradelabs.com. And you might even already have one in your neighborhood. And what this is, a place you go in, we do medical grade data when you walk in the door to see what is your biology doing today. And we know your goals because you work with us on surveys and AI to figure out your first goal, which may be longevity, but maybe just, losing some weight or getting your energy back, and then longevity. So with prioritized goals, and then we tell you which tech to use from our tech stack, all of which is so much better than running away from tigers or picking up rocks, which is what the gym is. And that's why I can do 20 minutes a week and look and feel the way I do now. And because we can fix your metabolism, we can cause your body to regenerate. And there's even new principles of biology that are coming out of this. So this is a data-driven way to not have to spend all of your life at the gym the way I used to when I still didn't lose weight. And it makes some people mad. They're like, well, that's cheating. I'm like, yeah, it's cheating. I cheated, but I got the results. And, now I can spend more time with my kids, with my community, with my businesses. And like, it matters to me. So that's what inspires me to do all this stuff. I don't want anyone to ever go through what I did. And I expect to be young for a long time. I like being younger at 51 than I was at 25. And I like it that my lab tests say that I'm 39. And I like it that I just got gene therapy that'll probably put me back to 30. I'm okay with that.
That feels good. So your current goal, as I understand it, is to live at least 180 years, right? I'm imagining back in your teenage years when your testosterone was lower than your mother's, that was not your goal. Where did that number come from and how has it evolved?
teenagers and even young adults, they don't think about longevity. Like you're not even aware from a psychological perspective of your mortality until you see a parent die. It doesn't really land. Or maybe a grandparent or a close friend or something, but that's very unusual. So what do you care about when you're young? You care about sex. You care about power. You care about friendships. You care about growing your career, growing your knowledge. And this is where all of your energy goes before you can think about it. And that's normal and healthy and good. So biohacking has to be phrased in a way that appeals to those things, because it turns out everything that makes old people young again makes young people more powerful and functional and aware and conscious. So the longevity techniques that we only start caring about when we're older, turns out those are the techniques that make epic superhumans out of 20-year-olds. I remember at the start of Bulletproof, I would do coaching with select clients, and I don't do that very often anymore. They come to I have a group with Naveen Jain from Biome, another big longevity company, and Vishen Lakiani from Mind Valley. The three of us do a $100,000 annual coaching program called the Apollo Group. And we work with a few entrepreneurs, very hands-on. That's the kind of coaching I do now that includes longevity work. But other than that, I don't do clients. But back in the day, I did. And I had this guy call me from Europe, and he said, Dave, I've read every blog post, every book, and I want you to tell me what else I can do. And this guy was a professional athlete. He was a model. He was a PhD. He'd done every brain upgrade. I've done some very esoteric stuff to my brain. He'd done all of them because I've mentioned them all. He found every little one. He was doing way more MCT oil than any human I've ever seen. He was like, I went through, there was nothing that I could offer him as a coach because he'd absorbed all my content so completely, and he'd done it all. He was 24 years old and had all of this accomplishment because he's like, he got it when he was there. Started when he was 19 and just did everything. So this is what happens. You do the stuff that makes you powerful and you get return on investment for the rest of your life. And then you do what I'm going to do, live to at least 180, or more accurately, die at a time and by a method of your choice. Well, then you get compound returns, you get higher returns because now you got the power when you're young, and then you get to have it for an extra 100 years. You technically should be in a position to rule the world.
And so where did 180 come from, right? Like what, like, and then do you see, and I think the answer is yes, but do you see that number changing in the near future?
180 was just, it's actually at least 180. So 180 is the minimum kind of expectation. And people are saying, Dave, you're an idiot. Like, this can't be right. The first objection, I'll tell you how I got in a minute, but the first objection is, well, when you're old, you're in a wheelchair with diapers, you don't know your name, and your skin is thin, and you're hunched over and all that. So why would you want to do that? In fact, I remember Maria Schreiber, who's a friend, runs a women's Alzheimer's movement, just a hell of a human being. She's like, I wouldn't want to do that, but it's because our picture is wrong of aging. And if you reframe it, like, okay, what if you are 100, but you look and feel better than you do today? You have all the wisdom and all the energy. And then people go, oh, I could do that. Well, yeah, everyone could do that. That's what we want. So that's the first thing you do. And if you assume that that's possible, then, okay, why 180? Because our current best is 120. Okay. I am asking for 50% better than our current best over the next 130 years. Now, I want to take you back 100 years. That person who's 120 today.
By the way, I knew there was an equation there.
There is. It's just a 50% kicker. But that person who's 120 today, World War I was fought with cavalry. We had some tanks and stuff, but they had just invented biplanes. They couldn't spell DNA because they hadn't invented it yet. No one knew about it. Antibiotics didn't exist. Telegraphs were happening. Fax machines didn't exist. I mean, it was in a completely different world. Today, the amount of information we have about biology, human biology, doubles every 73 days. And it's only getting faster. It's so much that no doctor will ever know all of it. It's impossible. Only an AI system can do that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And even this, we're having a conversation on video. In Silicon Valley, I worked on the first video streaming thing, like the first data center company. And this would have been $100 million initiative, what we're doing right now over the internet back then. And now I think we probably spent 6 cents on it.
That's why my credit cards are maxed out, by the way.
Exactly. And you look at things like cell phones. So in the early days of mobile phones, you go back to like the late 80s, you would see like the Hollywood producer with a Mercedes 300D convertible, and the whole trunk as the cell phone is a giant thing over his head. And he's talking on the phone on the freeway, and everyone's like, look what an asshole. Well, okay, the same thing's happening in longevity. So this gene therapy that I just did, that'll take about 9 years on average off of your epigenetic age, it costs $25,000. I'm collaborating with the company. By the way, daveasprey.com/gene therapy has all the info on what I'm doing. But that was just the first of 10 targets that we're working on. And the first target is something called follistatin. And when people get all 10 of those, I fully expect that alone could take 40 years off of your epigenetic age and raise your IQ. Like, that's amazing. That's one company. And I've looked at actually starting a venture fund in the longevity space. And I've identified several other companies that have the ability to take decades off your measured age. That's just happening right now. Is it going to be better in 2 years and 5 years? Yeah, we're at this point where you don't have to upload yourself to the internet. You're probably already uploaded to an internet you don't even know about. But the reality is that you can keep your hardware young for a very, very long period of time. And in my big book on longevity called Superhuman, I go through, okay, step 1, don't die. What are the 4 things that are going to kill you? Well, diabetes, which is a precursor to Alzheimer's, cancer, and cardiovascular disease. So let's have a working metabolism, shall we? Which means stop eating seed oils and toxins and grains. At least most grains most of the time. It's not that hard. And there's some other stuff that goes in there as well. And then, okay, so we've addressed diabetes and these big killers. Then what's the one thing you do to keep your car working forever? Do you know what that is?
Change the oil.
That doesn't work because you forgot the transmission fluid, right? So that's the whole thing, right? There's a maintenance schedule. And if you follow the maintenance schedule to swap out the right things at the right times, you can have a car that drives 500,000 miles, or you have a car that breaks down at 50,000 miles because you didn't change the oil. Your body's not that different. So we understand that there's about 7 pillars of aging. And if you read Superhuman, you'll find I've got those there. And then if you read some of the books that have come out since then, there's a very similar structure to those books. And maybe there's agreement, maybe they add one, maybe they subtract one, but there's 7 things. So you have specific hacks. And in Superhuman, like, here's the free way to change these things. Here's the low cost, $50 a month supplement. And here's what the crazy billionaires do. And I just do all of them. And then I write about them so that we can experience it. And the point of reading Superhuman is for you to understand there are dozens of compounds that are shown to extend lifespan in humans. Dozens. And I talk about them and what they are. And you're saying, well, how come I've never heard of ashitaba, which is a Japanese herbal supplement and food source? I don't know why you haven't heard of it, but maybe you should, because it has very robust longevity capabilities, right? So you realize, well, wait, what if I stacked a bunch of these things that address different pillars? Might I age less quickly than everyone else? Yes, you would. Can you measure this? Yes, it's called Dunedin Pace. It's part of the True Age DNA methylation test. And you can do that. And I'm around 79% of the normal speed of aging. And the lowest I've heard is actually a woman friend of mine who's at 63%, which means she's aging 63%. Why am I at 82? Well, let's see. I fly 200 days of the year. I'm running 6 companies, writing books, and I have like an intense and amazing life. And I'm only aging at about 80% of normal. And I'm certain that if I slow down, I can probably get the number lower, but I'm not ready to do that right now, in part because I know tech is coming and I have a mission, right? So and this is one of the things that's a bit scary when you look at, like, I just interviewed Brian Johnson, who's a friend even before he did longevity from his brain science stuff. And he's like, I'm all in. I'm just going to take this 2 years and this is my big focus. I'm going to have a whole team. I'm going to spend $2 million a year. I spent $2 million over 20 years, right? To first fix myself and then reverse aging even more. So what I care about most is how much benefit per minute of attention am I getting? Because it's relatively easy if you have unlimited time and unlimited money and you're willing to go to sleep every single night at this time, you're willing to shut down your social life and do all these things in order to reverse your age. That might be worth doing for a year, because if you're 20 years younger, then you age for 20 years and do it again. I'm okay with that, but I'd rather do it in a month, or I'd rather spend 2 minutes a day doing it, right? So it turns out, what is the effectiveness per effort for a longevity thing. And for me, like that gene therapy thing is really important. Getting enough animal protein, which is controversial. And another thing that's controversial is around exercise. It's a new study just came out before this that shows that, isn't this crazy, that too much exercise makes you old and too little exercise makes you old, and that there's a right amount. Who would have thought? Well, right now there's this mindset that happens in humans, because of the way our brains make decisions to save energy, is that if something is good, more is better. And we've made that mistake with exercise. And now provably, excess exercise is not good for you, and provably no exercises. So, all right, what do we do about this? Well, in my very most recent book called Smarter, Not Harder, I go through, okay, how do you get the physical fitness that is correlated with living a long time in the least possible effort? Because that's going to give you the most longevity. You don't wear your body out, but you're in shape. And this comes down to very carefully shaping the signals that go into your body to tell it what you want it to do. And we believe, because of really cognitive shortcuts, that area under the curve, the amount of work you do, equals moral goodness, and it equals results. Chris, do you know anyone who's worked really hard and didn't get results?
From time to time, we all have. Like that's a reality.
Well, wait, but that can't be, because working hard gets results, doesn't it?
Maybe working smarter, not harder. I don't know.
So, and this makes so many, especially like the longevity crowd. And I mean, we're all in this to figure out how to do this. Like I say, the longevity crowd, like we're all actively trying to, how do we get old and stay young, right? So there's a group of people, like, the more exercise you do, the better. You just have to muscle mass. I'm like, yeah, muscle mass matters, but that doesn't mean that more exercise equals muscle mass. In fact, my evidence is pretty strong that more muscle mass is good, but more exercise doesn't equal more muscle mass. Now, there are people with bowling ball shoulders my age. I am very muscular and very lean, which is a longevity body build. But at 20 minutes a week, that's pretty interesting. And as an example of this, when you go into an Upgrade Labs, a VO2 max is something that makes you live a long time, right? Well, if you spend 15 minutes a week with our tech, you will never sweat. You'll get 6 times better VO2 max than doing an hour a day of cardio. Multiple university studies support that. So now, who's going to live a long time? The guy who spends 5 hours a week huffing and puffing and fixes his VO2 max, gets a 2% improvement from an hour a day. Or the guy who spends 15 minutes a week and gets a 12% improvement in his VO2 max and spends the rest of the time dating, playing with his kids, meditating. I think efficiency is necessary for longevity. I don't want to live to 180 years if I have to spend 18 hours a day living to 180 years. It's not a good trade-off.
You are enjoying, well, at least I hope you're enjoying, the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, and make sure you share. But don't be that annoying guy, whatever you do. Don't share it with people who aren't actually interested in living beyond the norms. So to this point, we've really been talking a lot about mind, right? And I saw your recent interview with Jay Shetty, where you were talking about dealing with triggers and the reset process that you cover in your Smarter, Not Harder book. Actually, that process is very similar. A friend of mine, Dr. Wanis, his process, he calls it the subconscious rapid transformation technique. It's kind of very similar, it seems. But you talk about mind and body. In fact, the tagline on your book, The Biohacker's Guide to Getting the Body and Mind You Want. Which do you think is more important to address first, the body or the mind?
It's kind of like pushing on a string. If you don't have muscles, you won't have synaptic connectivity. And there are studies that show that the more muscular your glutes, in other words, junk in your trunk, the more synaptic connections you have. So the brain is there because of the muscles. So you can say, I want to be really smart and have no muscles. You can do that. It's just a lot harder. It's also, in my model of the body, you cannot separate the brain from the body and therefore the mind from the body. Because when something happens in the world around you, your body takes about 1/3 of a second if you're middle-aged. And if you're young, it takes about 1/4 second to process reality and decide what it's going to allow your brain to see. And you say, what do you mean? No, this is a measure at 40 Years of Zen, which is my high-end neuroscience company. We've got 7 patents in neuroscience. People come through every week and we upgrade their brains. And we're measuring this. And you can see, okay, what's your lag time on reality? And your brain doesn't get an electrical signal from a sound for about a third of a second after the sound happens. The body feels it right away and goes, is that worth my attention? Should I escalate that sound to the brain? If so, I'll put it into the auditory processing part of the brain. If not, let's just ignore it. What? That's an invisible process. And if you do psychedelics, or you do the 40 Years of Zen stuff that gets you in those altered states, or you do tantric sex or breath work, there's all kinds of pathways that aren't drugs that get even deep meditation that get you into this ability to, oh, wow, can I edit my operating system to show me what I want to see instead of what it thinks will keep me alive? This is just fundamental things you do. But one of the measures of longevity is how fast is your brain response time. I have the brain response time of an 18-year-old, 240 milliseconds. And is that because I take cognitive enhancers and I have for 25 years? Is it because I spent 6 months with electrodes on my brain doing 40 years in brain training? Is it because I've run electricity over my brain to increase my myelin sheath? Have I run electricity over the rest of my body that way too? All of those, I can't tell you what works, but I do everything because I think it matters. Now, that's the mind part of it. But since the body is the preprocessor for the mind and it decides what the mind sees, how do you fix this? Well, the model that I use at 40 Years of Zen is we're going to use the mind to change the settings in the body so the body spends a lot less electrical energy on useless tasks. It's kind of like going through your phone and turning off every alert that's stupid, right? And when you do that, you have peace. When you have peace, the amount of electricity that your body has available can be reallocated. And this is kind of shocking. You think about it. Electricity is a limiting factor in the body, and the body is very elegantly allocating every single electron it can make. So one of the biggest longevity hacks, make your mitochondria better, therefore have more electricity, therefore your brain works better, therefore your hormones work better, therefore your protein folding works better. And then the second thing you do is you fix the mind, which means interacting with the interface between the body and mind. And when you do that, magically, you waste a lot less electricity. And every drop of electricity you save by not holding a grudge, by not worrying about stuff that doesn't matter, by not being triggered by whatever the heck, if anything can trigger you right now, that means you're carrying a loaded gun. And that's kind of rude. And you should probably call a therapist and get rid of that crap because it's making you old. And that's my model for it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And all right, so my next question is, you probably know this. XPRIZE just launched their biggest prize ever called HealthSpan. The prize is $101 million with the goal of extending healthy lifespan by 10 years with a target of 20. It would not surprise me if you had some input on this because I know you're friends with Peter Diamandis. Also, Sergey Young, who is a speaker on this longevity summit, was the initial funder of that particular XPRIZE. You also support XPRIZE. You actually submitted the first dollars to Elon Musk's carbon capture XPRIZE.
Yeah, the $100 million XPRIZE, the number 2 XPRIZE, right? I can't say I started it. Another group, one of the groups there proposed the prize, but I gave the speech and donated the first dollars in order to make the prize a real thing that Elon later funded. And honestly, to me, because I'm going to live to 180, carbon capture matters. Right now, I don't give 2 shits about carbon, if I can be really blunt, because glyphosate and atrazine and plasticizers are going to reduce our fertility so far it doesn't matter with carbon. Like we're killing ourselves off. So carbon's one of those, like, do it later. Stop the pollution right now because that's making us old and making us dumb and it's dropping our testosterone. We got to fix that. So because I invest in carbon, don't believe that I'm trying to decarbonize the planet. I think we need low cost energy right now because we need that to live a long time and be free. But let's talk about, the XPRIZE. I was the smallest corporate sponsor of the XPRIZE when I ran Bulletproof. So there's like Aetna is sponsoring it and then little old Bulletproof. Because I believe in making the future better because I'm going to be here for the future. And so does Peter. And Peter's a friend. And Sergey and I have been friends for almost 10 years. I just sat down for coffee with him in Dubai about a month ago. So
I interviewed him just after that. So yeah, it was kind of cool.
Very cool.
We talked about that a little.
He's a great human being and a true believer. And you'll find there's a small tribe of people who've been working quietly for 20 plus years on longevity. And now we can finally talk about it. Before it was like so impossible that People say, oh, you're a flat earther too. Like, no, well, this is actually real science. And now we've got, guys at Harvard saying, actually we can do this. Yeah, we've known this for a while. So I'm happy that the XPRIZE is doing this. When I hear health span, it gives me indigestion. And I've actually talked to Peter about this. Health span is such a weaselly thing. It makes me sad. So health span means, oh, we're all going to die at the time we were going to die, but we'll at least be healthy until we die. Like, that just makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. I want to double human lifespan and be healthy the whole time. Like, let's just say it. We're going to live longer than we're supposed to, and we're going to be healthy the whole time. But I feel like every time someone says health span, they're just hedging their bets and they're afraid to say what they're really thinking. So extending human lifespan. And if they're talking about extending lifespan, by about 10 years, I don't know why we even need an XPRIZE for that, because I just did a therapy for $25,000 that's commercially available that does 9 years for a middle-aged person and 12 years for an older person. That XPRIZE is already in the bag if it's only 10 years. The venture fund that I'm considering doing, our goal is 50 years. Our investments will add 50 years to human life because the technologies are out there. I've already got 5 or 6 companies that are each of them, oh, here's 5 years, here's 10 years. Like, what do you mean 5 or 10 years? Yeah, they're taking that off your age, your measured age. So you're getting younger. And 10 years ago, we were dreaming about this stuff. In fact, in Superhuman, I said, you know what? Very soon now, someone is going to do gene therapy for longevity, and I can't wait to sign up for it. And someone's going to edit stem cells, iPSC edit them so that you can be younger and you have stem cells that actually do what you want them to do. And then I sat down and I met a doctor who was in medical school and read the book in medical school and became a multimillionaire from Tesla shares. So he said, screw this noise, I'm going to go build it. And he built it. I just did the therapy. That was 2016 until now. What is that, like 6-7 years? The world's changing. It's changing really fast. So anyone listening to this, you could be going, $25,000. Like, Dave, screw you. I only have $2,000 in the bank. In fact, half the US only has that. Guys, the first cell phone was 25 grand too. This is coming down. And when you know that this is possible, when you know that people are doing this, and then your insurance company comes to you and gives you some sort of nonsense, and your government comes to you and says, we're going to do this and do that, you can tell them to go screw themselves because you know what's possible and you know how much it costs. And you know how much they're spending on healthcare in the US, which is more than anywhere else in the world with the poorest results you could possibly get. And you can demand that you get access to longevity therapies that actually work. And the big pharmaceutical companies will hate this happening, and I don't care.
So, fan of XPRIZE.
You go, Peter.
I had the suspicion that their 10 and 20-year goals would not be in alignment with the kind of your thought processes. So I want to leave people with some tangible stuff. You talked about making things cost competitive so that the average person has access to them. One of the things that's probably even best is just to give up stuff. What are the top things people are getting wrong as it relates to longevity?
One of the top things people are getting wrong about longevity is this idea that animal protein is going to make you old. And I have considered this for many, many years, and I've gone back and forth on it.
Just to interject, I was reading Superhuman last night and noticed that your protein allotment was 0.5 grams per pound, and now it's 0.8 to 1. So if we had time, I was going to address that, but it's all that you're readdressing these things.
In Superhuman, I looked at a lot of data about this, and there's an argument for about 0.6, really more so than 0.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And I tried it. And what you find is you don't maintain muscle mass enough. If you want to live a long time, don't have sarcopenia. And it doesn't matter if you have adequate testosterone. It just doesn't seem to work very well. So there's sort of 2 clusters of longevity mindsets, and you have to pick one. One says that you'll live longer if you're in a caloric deficit, right, and eat lower amounts of protein, right? And that's hard to do. It's kind of miserable, and I've played around with it, and you actually don't feel so good. Your body temperature lowers, and the idea is you might live longer. But there's another cluster that says if you have muscle mass and you're managing other parameters of toxins, and especially amino acid ratios, that you're going to be better off. So tons of exercise plus low calories equals miserable life, cold body temperature, and maybe living longer. And I've known people for many years going, I just got used to being on 70% less calories, but they probably don't get that many results for the amount of effort. And you can just kind of mimic that with berberine or metformin, neither one of which I'm a fan of, by the way. So I've been playing around with my type of protein and the amount of protein. And there's another very large clump of data that shows about 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And this is animal protein, not plant protein. This stuff is nonsense. And when you do that, magic happens in terms of maintaining muscle mass and testosterone and all sorts of other longevity parameters. And then we have a conundrum. And the conundrum is, if you have more methionine, which is an amino acid that creates certain toxins that are pro-aging, or you have excess tryptophan, that the metabolism of those amino acids contributes to aging. Therefore, the animal rights or religious radical vegetarians will try to say, you have to go vegan and eat plant-based stuff. They're very happily backed by big food companies trying to sell you peasant food.
With glyphosate on it.
Glyphosate-soaked peasant food. What could go wrong? So what you end up with is you say, okay, what if I could get the benefits of animal protein, which include minerals, which is a major part of why I look the way I do. I have very strong mineral density, and I created a supplement specifically for that. Even my new Danger coffee, which is my post-Bulletproof thing, is full of trace minerals because trace minerals are foundational to all longevity. But even before we get into the minerals in animal protein, we've got to deal with this thing called mTOR. So mTOR is mammalian target of rapamycin, and this is a compound that causes growth in your body. And now that's good, right? Because you have growth, you have muscles. Muscles are good. But if you have growth, you might also have cancer. Cancer is bad. So how do we balance this out? Well, a bunch of people said, well, animal protein raises mTOR more than plant protein. Therefore, eat plant protein, despite all the downsides of plant protein. There's just one little problem. Guess what raises mTOR more than animal protein? Do you know?
I don't.
Carbs. Carbohydrates, which are inherently in plants, raise mTOR more. So if we're really managing mTOR, there's only one way to do it. And I wrote a book on it. It's called Fasting. The Bulletproof Diet was the first book with intermittent fasting in the last 15 years. And then my Fastest Way book. So yes, have an empty stomach for a good amount of the time, and you're going to get the benefits of that because fasting, coffee, and exercise suppress mTOR. So you do all three at the same time. Then you have some animal protein after you do your 5 minutes of lifting, and then you grow muscle, and you do it in very little work. And to balance out these proteins, what do? You do this weird thing called glycine. What is the number one source of glycine? It is collagen. Who made collagen $1 billion business? Bulletproof made collagen an anti-aging supplement. We're all using collagen. There's hundreds of companies that make collagen supplements following my lead there. Why do I do at least 20 grams of collagen per day when I'm on an animal protein diet? Because the glycine in collagen cancels out the damage from methionine. You can also supplement glycine, and I do that. I take 3 to 6 grams of glycine per day on top of that. So now I'm getting all the benefits of animal protein, but it's not making me old, and you're better off. So the idea of eating highly processed industrial sludge, heavy metal contaminated, allergy-inducing, autoimmunity-inducing plant proteins that kill a lot more animals than grass-fed beef, it is wrong for the environment, it's wrong for your longevity and your body, and it's even meaner to animals if you think about all the turtles that are chopped up by tractors for your stupid tofu. So we just need to get off of that. It was a mistake. Everyone who says, I'm going to go plant-based and be a longevity figure, look at them. Like man boobs. You look like Bill Gates, you go for that. It's not a good look. It's not a healthy look. It's not a longevity look. Like, show me the data. And I'm a fan of animal protein. And there are other things in that book that also go with it. There's the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet and the vegan diet have a lot in common. I've been both. They both made me sick. Most people who go carnivore for 2 or 3 months, hallelujah, you're going to solve all kinds of problems. And then you add back in foods until you find the ones that are the problems. The plant foods are usually the problems, and maybe milk and maybe eggs. But it's usually the plant foods. And you just have to figure out which ones. I have a lot of plant foods I'm sensitive to because I was a raw vegan, and you get a lot of allergies that way. So if you stay carnivore for a long time. What happened to me before it was called the carnivore diet, as I was testing the edges of the Bulletproof diet, is I gave myself some food allergies, including to eggs that I didn't have before, because I was doing I was doing meat and eggs every single day, right? Just trying to get enough food in. And I lost a bunch of weight. And this is great. But after about 3 months on that, I looked at my sleep score. This was before you could get an Aura. I was sleeping with a headband at the time. And I was waking up a dozen times a night, and I was just feeling crappy after 10 hours of sleep. And what happens there is leaky gut, the problems with Akkermansia, the gut bacteria. And then very reliably, first goes sleep, then goes your morning kickstand, and then your hair starts thinning if you don't have some carbs. That's why the Bulletproof diet actually is a cyclical keto diet. You only use keto if you need to. And it uses clean carbs without toxins. And it uses the best quality animal proteins, which are grass-fed animal proteins. And if you cycle in and out of ketosis, and you do that with some intermittent fasting, it's a longevity diet. It enhances fertility even for people. But over fasting, never having any carbs, and never having any meat are all strategies where you'll feel good for a little while and then you'll hate your life later. So, by the way, same thing with over-exercising. So what you want to do is go through that cycling up and down. And that's where I ended up with what I do. But animal protein is better than plant protein, provably.
I like your show me the data and also show me the physique with your Bill Gates comparison. All right, I've got some wrap-up questions. I know we probably have right amount of time if we rapid fire through these. The first one may be self-evident, but I do have to ask it. I literally asked every expert on this longevity summit. Dave, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
No, I would like to live until I'm bored. And then I would like to meditate in a cave and walk out of my body and just leave it there, not decomposing for centuries. Don't know if that's possible, but it sounds like fun. But basically when I'm done, and I have no problem with that. There are people in the longevity field who are terrified of death. I have no problem with dying. I just don't want to do it until I'm ready.
Yeah. How long do you think humans can live?
Unless a comet hits the planet or we allow evil forces in our government to take away our right to control our own biology, there is no conceivable limit. I do think, though, that most humans after a few centuries will just be bored and want to go do something else.
Interesting. And you've been giving advice this whole time. Let's kind of summarize. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts for longevity and a long health span, your favorite word, that you could share.
Drink filtered tap water. Minimize LED lighting, especially at night. Get better sleep. Only eat grass-fed animals when you eat animal protein. Avoid man-made toxins, especially glyphosate and endocrine disruptors. And don't eat grains. They're stupid.
Grains are stupid. I like that. And Dave, how can people contact you?
Well, go to dave.asprey on Instagram, or you can listen to The Human Upgrade, which has 1,200 episodes, 400 million downloads, and has won a Webby Award. This is where I interview all the longevity experts.
All right. And what in the near future are you excited about?
You know, we're right at the cusp of being able to use AI to live longer, and it's happening. We're doing this at Upgrade Labs. People come in, we're getting thousands of data points of medical grade data without having to do medical grade stuff, and using that to make very intelligent decisions and to measure how you're doing. So I don't want people to go to the gym unless they know exactly what to do to live longer or reach their goals. I don't want them to meditate unless they know exactly do this, do that. So we're finally to the point where we have the knowledge and you can see if it works. So it's not, oh, I'm just going to do this for 20 years and hope it works. Every day, every week, you get a score that tells you, so you can adjust your course. And this is going to free up a huge amount of human energy, human capacity, and human longevity. And what I'm most excited about is a world that's full of people of the wisdom of age and the energy of youth. And because I didn't mention this earlier, but right now, there are very few babies being born in all of the West. So populations are going to crash. And if we don't keep ourselves young, society in 25 years is going to suck and there'll be a lot of empty cities. So let's make ourselves full power human beings, and longevity is how we're going to do it.
So you mentioned Linus Pauling. I actually got to see him speak before he passed, a 2-time Nobel Prize winner. One of them was the Nobel Peace Prize. And one of the things that I took away from his speech was this combination of chemistry and biology was really the thing that allowed him to excel in so many areas, because at the time, biochemistry didn't even exist. I see what you're doing with this kind of approach, this computer approach, this hacker approach, computer hacker approach, and biology as having direct parallels to that kind of man who ultimately won Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm excited to have interviewed you and excited to actually I'll be at your conference in May.
Beautiful.
And thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chris. It was a lot of fun, and thanks for putting this whole summit together. If you're listening to the summit right now, understand we're at a sea change. Humans are going to live longer than you think. You can live longer than you think. It's longer than you could possibly imagine because your brain is focused on history. The future is very different than you think. It is better than you think. And if you can be healthy and you can be 150 years old, what are you going to be doing with all that time? You better figure it out.
Love it. Thanks, Dave. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.